All right. So favorite story from this one. I was part of a large organization that would do monthly business reviews. And so they tried to look at everything top to bottom in this business every 30 days. This one gentleman was kind of the GM of a particular line of business. I think it was like over $100 million of revenue. So it was a big business. And he had to put everything onto one slide because that was the direction is I need a one slide update from your line of business for everything that's happening. So what he would do is he would write the whole thing out and then shrink it down to like 4 font. I mean, it was just like microscopic. And it was kind of an FU to whoever his manager was that he's like, I'm going to do it, but it's not going to be helpful. And then in the middle of this one PowerPoint slide, at 4 font, which was microscopic, I think I actually did get a magnifying glass out to read it. There's this line that says, I bet you haven't read this. And if you come to my office and point this out, I'll give you $20. And it was basically proving that nobody is really paying attention to these processes. Like we were doing this, but we don't really know why.
Welcome to the Make Work Not Suck podcast.
All right, Ryan. So let's talk about burnout. Man, I think that one's timely. I think there's a lot of people, especially in a post-COVID world, the last 4 years, struggling with burnout. I know I've felt that at times. How about we start with you? You got a story of burnout? You ever feel like you've been there?
I haven't, but I mine is the serial entrepreneur running too many companies and trying to balance, work and personal and kids and wives and soccer games. And
was that wives plural?
Did I say wives? I meant to say
yeah,
wife.
we might need to ask our editor to fix that.
Singular wife.
One wife.
Multiple kids, one wife.
There's certainly burnout that can come from juggling too many things professionally and personally, right? And so maybe that's one category of burnout that we could talk about. But I don't know if that's necessarily what most people experience when we talk about burnout.
Let's maybe rephrase the question is, have I ever created burnout or caused burnout? And the answer is, oh, yes, I have.
Oh, yes, you have. Okay.
I've learned from that mistake.
Interesting. All right. So I want to hear that story. Let's start there.
Oh, that story? It's which one? Now you put me on the spot and my mind's going blank. I mean, I think it's those times where you're like, into the quarter, big strategic projects, and it's just, push for results. Honestly, every time looking back, it's when it was a lack of vision that it created a lot of just busy, and everybody was just wanting to get to the result. And so we created a lot of extra work. And because we were only pushing for the result without a clear vision, we created burnout. Dozens of times, in the earlier days, did we create a lot of burnout like that.
So what would you say is the antidote to that?
Well, you know what? Let's just talk about the call we were on earlier today. I mean, This is probably a good, real example. We're going through a, story workshop for client success, for client onboarding for a particular company. There was a lot of work put into it. But when we got on the call, it was not clear what the vision was. And what did we do? We wasted 45 minutes trying to solve an unknown problem, right?
Problem that has already been solved, actually.
Well, probably it was already solved, right? So the thing I think for us is what we did is we identified we didn't have a clear vision. And then we stepped back and said, okay, let's reassess the journey here, regroup, get everybody on the same page, right people, et cetera, et cetera. And then we'll have another story workshop. I think too many companies, they run into that problem because they don't have a clear vision and they're anxious to get to a result. I think they would just power through the meeting and they would end with an inferior or subpar product or output or whatever, which then would have created even more work on the individuals down the line and then just cascades.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had coffee with a founder CEO this morning, and he was telling me a little bit about his company and kind of the transition and the growing pains that they're going through. There's a couple of employees that he's like, they keep telling me they're super busy, but I'm not entirely sure what they're doing or what the value is of it. I don't question they're working hard, but is it worth all of that time and effort? And he's like, I just haven't had time to really look at that. And I wonder if that might be another kind of symptom of a lack of vision. Is you could have people well-intentioned, working very hard, putting in a lot of hours and a lot of effort. But if we're not clear on why we're doing that, it could be a lot of wasted effort.
Oh, yeah. There's the stereotypical, we all want to do good work. Most of our workforce are good people and they want to do a good job and they want to earn their paycheck, but it's activity at the expense of accomplishment. They're not really accomplishing anything. They're doing a lot of activity that keeps them busy. And then when they're, because that doesn't actually achieve the result, then when the accomplishment has to come, then that's spent in extra innings, if you will.
Right.
And that leads to burnout. And I think sometimes as, managers and executives, we're kind of as long as the person's getting the result, we don't care, but we don't often see the burnout because of the lack of vision. If the vision or the definition of the role is not clear enough, and what is it? I forget the phrase. You'll probably catch it when I say this, is if you don't give them a plan or guidance or a framework or whatever the parameters, they're going to come up with their own parameters to get the job done. And if it's unclear, then that's where it leads into activity. If you don't provide that vision and that level of and a little bit of journey to guide them, then you're going to have an exorbitant amount of activity to achieve the same goal, which leads to burnout.
I would say as I look back on my career, I've experienced burnout in a couple of places. I think for me, primarily, it would be trying to juggle too much personally and professionally at the same time. Not the Ryan Hodges, I'm running 12 companies at the same time problem, but just, kind of a lot on multiple fronts. But I've also felt the burnout from, I would say, like a very inefficient organizations. Like being part of a larger organization, things are just so much harder than they need to be to get done. I'd be curious as to how you would diagnose this one, because I don't think it was as much a lack of vision, although it could be. What it felt like, though, was a lot of legacy processes. Like we've just always done this. And so we continue to do it, but we don't really know why we're doing it. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done, but nobody can tell me why.
Ooh.
And maybe it was important a while ago, but like we're not allowed to ask if it's still important.
Where processes are either sacred cows or, we don't want to offend somebody because they invented this process, 10 years ago. Or my favorite is I was in a meeting once and I was asking why the process was 37 steps. And I was promptly corrected by one of the founders jokingly. And then as he was saying it with tears in his eyes, crying, he says, it's not 37 steps. He says it's 37 pages. And I don't know how we got to 37 pages of steps to do this process. And we need to fix it. But all we know how to do is the 37 pages.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So favorite story from this one. I was part of a large organization that would do monthly business reviews. And so they tried to look at everything top to bottom in this business every 30 days. This one gentleman was kind of the GM of a particular line of business. I think it was like over $100 million of revenue. So it was a big business. And he had to put everything onto one slide because that was the direction, is I need a one slide update from your line of business for everything that's happening. So what he would do is he would write the whole thing out and then shrink it down to like 4 font. I mean, it was just like microscopic. And it was kind of an FU to whoever his manager was, that he's like, I'm going to do it, but it's not going to be helpful. And then in the middle of this one PowerPoint slide, at 4 font, which was microscopic, I think I actually did get a magnifying glass out to read it. There's this line that says, I bet you haven't read this. And if you come to my office and point this out, I'll give you $20. And it was basically proving that nobody is really paying attention to these processes. Like we were doing this, but we don't really know why.
Okay, I got it. All right, here's what we're going to run with. So I agree with that. And that's funny. That's like the Eminem writer that's in the contract for, I can't remember which band. I'm going to be ridiculed for not remembering the band because it's a famous one. It's like Rolling Stones or something like that.
Yeah. The green M&Ms.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, I thought it was brown. Is it green?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's brown.
Okay.
Maybe it's brown.
Anyways, it's funny because I think so many times we get into an IQ mindset and we think very logically and we're like, this is the ideal process. And the issue is like we invent this theory in our head that this is what it's going to be. And then the second that the employees on the street, they're like looking at it's like looking at the map and then looking at the roads. And it's like, this map does not match reality here. And I have to go down this road. And so then what do? They just throw it out the window because it's useless.
Right.
And then what does somebody do? We duct tape another component onto it. And then we duct tape another component on it. And we duct tape another component because we didn't account for the journey we were trying to go on. And that's how it ends into 37 pages.
Right.
Because we didn't actually understand the vision or the destination we were trying to get to. And that's the what is it? Book smart, street smart. Too many processes are invented and created in the book smart mindset because we envision this perfect world. And the reality, they fall apart in the street. And that's why they get tossed out by the everyday employee. And I'm sure you can ask anybody in any organization, how much do you follow the processes by the T? And you're probably going to get, 10 out of 10. Like, what processes?
Processes?
They don't make sense.
Yeah, I think another reason for burnout that I've experienced, and this is maybe a different way of saying what you're saying is that processes have kind of a lot of gravity to them, a lot of like inertia, right? So once somebody's done the work to establish a process, nobody wants to go back and fix it or update it. And the problem, especially in fast growing organizations, is the processes get outgrown. And so we're still doing, I've seen this with organizations where we got to 10 million and we established all these processes and they were great for a $10 million company, but now we're a $50 million company and everything is just excruciatingly painful to get done. And it's because you have $10 million company processes and $10 million company tools, but you're a $50 million company. That creates incredible burnout amongst the people because they don't have the tools and the processes and the systems and the decision authority that they need to operate the business as it exists today.
1,000%, like every, I can't remember the exact milestones, like 1 million, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, 50 million, 100 million. You have to reinvent yourself every time, right?
Right.
And again, too often, even though those processes, it goes into the systems when you get larger, the system is designed, with using the book smart analogy. And then people don't use it because it doesn't make sense or it adds too much complexity. So then they skirt it. And then you get the nagger coming back in. You're like, well, you didn't submit your TPS report and I need you to do that. And you're like, what's the point of this? And they're like, I don't know, but it's my job to make sure you do it.
Right.
I've got a buddy. It was actually a company I worked with a few years ago. We rebuilt one of their divisions. The whole philosophy I got with the management team is like they were micromanaging hours. They paid everybody's salary, but they micromanaged the hours, legacy billing mindset, et cetera. And I said, if we've got customers paying premium dollar and they are satisfied and the work's getting done, why do you care how many hours somebody works in a day? Well, yeah, we really don't. We built the entire model around it. Sold the company. And then the new company coming over, they said, we love everything about what you're doing and we don't want to mess with it. And then what did they do? They took their processes that were designed in a vacuum and tried to apply it. And what did you do? You burned out the 3 key employees in the organization because they were, you didn't put your time in. You didn't put your tickets in. You didn't follow up with this. You didn't do, it's not that they weren't following process or being belligerent or anything like that. It's that the processes were at the expense of the productivity of the employee so that somebody else can watch a dashboard and feel happy.
Right. Let's say you're an employee and you're feeling burnout. You've been with this company for a little while and you're just kind of over it. What advice would you give to somebody in that situation?
I would ask if the burnout is due to following process. Well, I think it's go a couple ways. If it's due to following process that is creating an exuberant amount of work. And if that's the case, then I think I would go back and say, what is the vision for this? And what is the outcome that's needed? And then ask your manager, can we find a more efficient way to achieve the same goal? A lot of time, a how is dictated down from the top. And really what needs to be dictated from the top is a what and why, and let the team figure out the how. Because I guarantee you they can come up with a better how with some guidance, not saying it's going to be perfect, but you want to figure out how to move warehouses in a box faster? Why don't you ask how the forklift driver, the most efficient way to drive the forklift through the warehouse? Then you can figure out how to organize your stuff, not organize it in a vacuum and then have the forklift driver crisscross the warehouse 37 times unnecessarily.
Yeah, that's good. I would add maybe a kind of a coaching angle to this for people that are at lower levels of an organization. I think it's important to take care of yourself. And so having a good understanding of what you do to recharge your batteries. I don't mean the batteries of your forklift. I mean like for you personally, right? Whether that's spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, like what do you need to do to recharge so that when you do come to work, you can bring your A game? I find many people do not know how to recharge. That leads to this cycle of burnout where work takes a lot out of me. I go home, home takes a lot out of me. I go back to work, work takes a lot out of me. And there's just constant drain and nothing kind of pouring back into you. And so on an individual level, I think it's very important for us to understand what I need in order to bring the best that I have to contribute to work. And honestly, early in my career, I did not take advantage of vacation days. I left a lot of vacation days on the table. And looking back, I think that was dumb. I think I should have gone for a hike or, laid in bed and read a book or something. Like whatever it is that really helps you recharge the batteries, that's got to be on your schedule on a regular basis.
Well, and what's funny with that one is I'm willing to bet, at least for the American audience, they're too afraid to do that because it'll lead to further burnout. And so it's like, I can't take a vacation because if I take a vacation, the backlog is going to go even further and then I'm even more burned out.
Okay,
that's a whole different problem.
Is that a different episode?
That's a different episode. Let's hit a different angle for a second. So if there is a process or you're feeling burned out and you're an employee, I think the thing is you got to step back and ask, do I understand this process? There are processes that are designed for a reason. They're good processes, good systems and tools, and you don't understand the connectedness to it. And so you spend more time fighting it. And then what you actually do is you burn yourself out because you fought the system as opposed to understood the value you were creating behind it. So I would ask, if you're facing that, one is like, what's the vision of this process, right? Like, why does it exist? What's it for? Who does it benefit? What's the result it creates? Is there a more efficient way to do this? Or is this the best way to do it? And then what is in my way of getting this done? Like what other work is on my plate or what other work is getting in the way? Because there's a percentage of it where you're creating the work. You think you're doing work to add value and you're burning yourself out. So The real question is like, if you're an employee and you can't control everything else around you, the real question is, are you creating your own burnout or is this a problem of the system? And so that self-identification process, I think, can see. Because at the end of the day, if the company expects you to follow a process and it does actually do the job efficiently once you understand it, then anything you're doing beyond that is just waste. Now, if it's an extra project for, if you're trying to go for a promotion, you're taking on extra work like that, that's a different topic. But if you're just doing, work because you think it adds value, you're actually contributing to your own burnout.
I would want to remind people who don't know this that your manager is not trying to burn you out. Your manager, I think about every management situation that I've been in, man, if I lose somebody, my workload gets worse, right? If somebody quits, somebody burns out, somebody has to take sick days, right? Everybody else has to bear that load. And so it would be the rare manager who would not want to hear from their employees ways that things could be done better. Because I know as a manager that if I burn through my people and they quit or they get sick or whatever happens, I've got bigger problems now. And so most managers want things to happen as efficiently as possible. So I would encourage any employees who have ideas of how to make things better, have that conversation with your manager. Don't be afraid to have that conversation because the only person who doesn't want you to burn out more than you is your manager.
Yep. Oh, 1,000%. And I think if you're a manager, and then I've got a good question that I want to raise after this. I think if you're a manager, if someone comes to you with this, you really have to look, was this process invented in a vacuum? And does it conflict with reality? Or is it the right process? And do they need coaching to understand the vision of it and how it does contribute to the organization? So for you as a manager, it's your job to, not just, well, Bob thinks this process sucks, so let's change it.
Right.
If the process really does suck and you understand it and it doesn't make sense, then that's where you can take on the responsibility of trying to get it changed. And of course, if it's several tiers above you, then again, that's going to hit the next one. And it's, how can executives identify the signs of burnout? And then what can we do to prevent it?
All right. Before we go to the executives, I comment on the managers. I think some managers are very attuned to their people and know when somebody's suffering burnout. Some managers are not. For those that are attuned, I think they've got a little bit of an advantage, right? Knowing when somebody's not doing well, being able to read the pulse of how their people are doing and try to prevent that, right? Try to head that off, give them a day off. ask them if they want to talk, provide resources. Maybe there's some stuff happening at home that they need somebody to talk to, professional counselors, things like that. I would say for those managers that are not as attuned to that thing, we need to be reminded that that's super important. These are people. They are emotional creatures. They are not robots, at least not yet. We're not all robots. So find a way to check in on your people, or you will pay a very high price when you get surprised by their burnout. That's my manager advice. What about the executives?
Okay, so how can executives identify the signs of burnout? You get one chance to answer this correctly. There is one correct answer. See if you can nail it. It's a trick question, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can think of a couple of things. I could, see hours rising. I could see margins shrinking. I could see morale dipping. I could see resignations increasing, sick days increasing. I could see a lot of ways that I would know, but those would all be lagging indicators, and it would be too late at that point to prevent it. So I don't know. What are you thinking? How do you identify burnout?
It's easy with the Oracle Pulse. You got real-time analytics. You can see it. You can see the dip in the performance, and you can get ahead of it. Shameless plug.
Funny. Shameless plug. But I was talking to somebody, a former user of that. They left the company that they were with, but they were the ones who had brought Oracle in, and that was the story of why he brought it in the first place. He's like, my people were burnt out. I knew it, but I didn't know who was like still bought into the vision and they were willing to push through, and who was just like, I'm done. And he actually said that tool really helped.
Yep. Okay, on a less shameless plug note, how do you identify signs of burnout? I think everything you said, right? Those are all lagging indicators, dip in culture, efficiencies, margins, et cetera. But I think one other one, it's usually we're pretty good at seeing when a culture is going negative, or you can see the negative behaviors. But the silent killer is the indifference, because the employee, when you see people go indifference, you've got a really big problem. It means they're not engaging, but they're enough there that they're working through their job. They need a paycheck. At the end of the day, they're there to earn the paycheck. It's not that when you have a tough problem inside the organization or a project and everybody works tireless hours, you can come out on the other side of that jazzed up and, winning. And, maybe some people take some vacation or whatnot. But when it's that continual grind, when people start to you kind of see them check, maybe when they first started or before this whole burnout happened, they were coming up with ideas. They're very engaged. And when you see that start to slow down, and you see them start to just get quiet or not respond, or just, yes, that's okay, I'll do it. I'll just do whatever you tell me to. I don't want to fight the system. It's the indifference that's worse, because usually those are good, hardworking employees that are looking for another job because, what's the standard rule, right? It's either the company, the opportunity, or the boss, right? And they may love their boss and they may like the pay, but if the business vision and direction is leading to burnout, they're going to jump ship. And it's that
I've heard those people called the employees that quit but don't leave.
Yeah. Yes.
And you're right. They are probably the most dangerous employees to the culture. So if you had somebody like that, if you're an executive and you see somebody, maybe employee level, maybe manager level, maybe even a fellow executive level, who looks like they've quit but not left, how would you try to engage them and repair the burnout?
So this is where I'll take your PTO advice earlier. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes this is where you got to suck it up as the leader. Let them have a break.
Yeah.
This isn't let them have a 2 or 3 days off and then put them right back in the same grind. And this is not an overnight fix either. So, one day off doesn't solve all the problems, but sometimes you just need a little bit of a disconnect from it. And so I think if you see those signs of burnout, take 2 or 3 days off, take a Friday, Monday off, have a long weekend. And I want to address this problem with you when you come back refreshed. I want you to think about how we can solve this and how can we reduce the burnout? Like, what is causing the burnout? What's causing this indifference? The loud ones, the noisy people, I hate to say this, the complainers and all the stuff, throwing out the display of emotion, they'll tell you everything that's wrong, but it's all symptom level, right?
Usually, yeah.
It's that silent person that if you can get them disconnected from the issue, give them the breathing room, one that shows you care. Because if you show that you care and genuinely care about and want to solve the problem, when they come back, they will give you an exuberant amount of information that will act. I mean, a lot of times when this happens, I look at it, I'm like, wow, I can see, like, we can cut this entire section of the process out and bypass it, and it's better. Let's just do that.
Right. Yeah. I think I'd agree. I would add, if I saw somebody who is really struggling with burnout, I think from a diagnostic standpoint, I would probably start with, how are they doing personally? Is this a problem I can solve or not? If this is a personal issue and you need time or you need some kind of support and resources in your personal life, I may or may not be able to help with that, but that's kind of one path of addressing burnout. I think the other path is, what am I doing as a manager, leader, executive to possibly be creating this? And if this is more about your work that's burning you out, then let's talk about how we fix those processes. And so I think you've kind of got to figure out if it's personal or professional before you start diagnosing.
Yeah, let's assume the burnout is not the employee's fault. So then how can the leader identify the gaps causing the burnout? I mean, step one is leadership taking ownership of the problem, right?
Right.
Leadership has to own that this is causing the burnout. Got to look in the mirror, do the self-reflection. Whether they inherited this process or problem or they created it. First step is admitting you have a problem and owning the problem. Then now what? What's next?
I would agree. I've worked with a lot of executives who won't acknowledge the problem, and you can't fix something they won't acknowledge. And I think that starts at the top, because if everybody up to the senior leadership team knows there's a problem, but the senior leadership team won't admit it, it's not going to get better.
Yeah, if you're an employee manager in that case, I mean, it is your right. Good friend of ours has always said he believes every employee has the right to choose the freedom to choose who they're led by. I probably butchered that. I'm sorry, but close enough, right? Everyone has the right to choose their leader, which means if you're stuck in this position and leadership is not going to own it, find another opportunity. Don't let yourself continue to be burnt out, disgruntled, disconnected. It's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for your family. So if that's really the case, find a better opportunity. But if the leadership team acknowledges it, if you're a leader and you acknowledge it, you look in the mirror, you understand the cause, and you're willing to work with the team, and you got buy-in, what's next?
I would say I would ask for input. I would ask the team, where are you doing things that you don't think are valuable? Where are we doing things just because we've always done them? Where are there opportunities for us to get more effective at what we do? Because we know that more is going to be demanded of us. Just because I'm the CEO founder doesn't mean that I'm going to know where all the problems are. So we need your help, right? That's a cultural, let's help one another find the ways that we can be more efficient, more effective together.
I would challenge you to go one step before that.
Okay.
I think that's journey. I think that's the journey you should take. But I think first and foremost is you should probably define the vision of what the process needs to be or what the solution needs to be. Because I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to a how problem and not a what and why problem. But without understanding the what and why, we send to, just on that story workshop we were on earlier, we were all over the place on the how. Yeah. And that's where we said, time out. We got a what and why problem. We got a vision problem. Let's reset, get clarity on that before we try to solve this how. And I think that's where if you can define the what and why or the vision of the process or problem or, whatever area it is it's creating it, then you take that and your very next step is what you just said. What are the things that are slowing us down? What is this? And you throw that what and why, the vision up there and go, okay, what is this even needed to get to there? No, it's not. Okay, let's put that in let's figure out how to get rid of it bucket.
Or make it as small as possible.
Or small as possible, right. And so I think then you're starting to work through the journey of what needs to happen. And then once you get on the other side of that, once you've kind of identified it, you got to test it a little bit, et cetera, then it's, if we make all those changes, is everybody bought in to committing these changes and trying it out? It may not work. We may not have solved the problem, but the other killer is when you go through the effort to make it a process change, and then everybody goes, well, I'll use it when I see it work by everybody else.
When I see it working, right.
No, everybody's got to be all in, same page, and give it a shot, because it's the only way it's going to get fixed. And then you check the results, and then you check that against the vision and see if you're there. And you might have to iterate through that 2 or 3 times. But if you go through that process, then as a leader, as a manager, or as leaders, managers, and employees together, you can work together to reduce the burnout.
Yeah. I think that's a different episode of kind of the change management, how to do change management well. We'll have that conversation some other time.
That's another episode. Yes, change management, because that's a whole nother topic of pain, is when people just make
Pain and suffering.
change. Well, the change fatigue that creates burnout.
It sure does.
Where you just keep editing a process with no vision to it.
Right.
And what does that create? It creates change fatigue. So here's a question. How can employees bubble up problems that are causing burnout in a way that doesn't seem like whining?
Yeah.
So I think this is twofold. I think this is one, if you're an employee, how can you do this proactively going up? And if you're a manager or a leader, how can you kind of correct this a little bit, but still get the input?
I think a lot of this comes back to really a question of why. Like, why are we trying to make this better? It's not a bad thing to try to make your job easier. However, it is work. They pay you to be there, right? This isn't Disneyland where you pay them for the privilege of walking through the gates, right? What I have found is that when employees or even managers and leaders are thinking first about the vision and first about the customer and say, would it be better for our customers? Would it be better for our vision to try things this way? Could we be more efficient? Could we be more effective? And oh, by the way, it also makes my job easier. I think that's a much easier sell than leading with a selfish mindset, which is like, this is hard. I don't like this. I want to change it. I think it's really kind of how you frame it and what's the focus. If the focus is the vision and the customers, it's usually well received. If the vision is making my life easier, harder to sell, sounds more like whining.
I think you can do that to say, I'm trying to make my job easier. Because if you come back in and say, look, I'm only supposed to be working 8 hours a day and I'm doing it in 12, like I'm trying to make my life, more real, the job more realistic. I don't think a manager would have that. It's if the person's like, I'm working too many effing hours in the day and this is BS and F all, exaggerating, but the burnout, it creates emotion. And sometimes the only way it's like the toddler when they're young, like they can't communicate. So what do? They cry. When you can't understand problems, sometimes it comes out in frustration. So from the inside, of course, you want to try to check the emotion. We'll use facts and logic. Don't be a robot, but it's okay to say, this is to my burnout. I am feeling this way. I'm looking for a solution. As long as you're approaching it in a positive intent, you don't have to be all happy, bubbly and happy and, hey, I've got a problem. Let's solve it. You can be real, but what is your intent? If your intent is negative, you're going to get shut down. If your intent is positive, for the team to be more efficient. I want to find a way to do my job more efficient so that I can get more responsibility because I want to raise. I want to, stop working 12 hours a day because I'm missing time with my kids at home. I think all those are viable reasons. And you can even with some of the pains and frustrations or what it's caused, because at the end of the day, you said it in the beginning, we're all human. And so, if you have a problem and the manager is in this employee focus thing, and I mean, if an employee came up to you and said, look, I'm working at 12 hours a day and I have a 1-year-old home and I'm coming home after they go to bed, I would really like to find a way home, by 6 o'clock as opposed to 9 o'clock so that I can spend time with a 1-year-old child. Like, can you help me out? Oh, get back to work. Like, if I was their executive, I'd fire them. Right. But I think on the other side with the executive going from down, this is where I kind of use the toddler example. Sometimes whining is going to come out. I think what you have to do in this case is you have to lead the horse to water, maybe a bad example, but it's you want to get them in from an emotional state to an IQ state by just asking some good questions that kind of flip that paradigm, as in to say, what would this, if we go through this, so I understand you're upset, what would this bring to you if we go through this? Like, I understand there's a problem, you're frustrated, you're very upset. I hear you. First, I hear you, I acknowledge it. What value would this bring to you? Right there, you're stopping the emotional side of it. You acknowledge it, you stop it, and then you get them into an IQ or more, human intelligence based conversation. And a lot of times they're like, whoa, will it be able to do this or that? Or, sometimes you'll get smart aleck responses like, well, I get to play more golf, which May or may not be a bad thing. But I think it's don't be curious. If they're coming to you with the problem and they're struggling to express the pain, be curious and seek to understand. Use a Stephen Covey one right there, right? Seek to understand before being understood.
Yep.
Don't just assume the whining. Seek to understand, and you might find the real problem.
All right. So I like that. So to wrap up, if you're an employee struggling with burnout, I would say communicate to your manager, keep the emotions in check, communicate the problem. I would recommend thinking through some recommendations or potential solutions. Don't just go to your manager with problems, go to them with a problem and some ideas of how to fix it.
Or even pain points or data points. And I would say this, you said a minute ago, come without, leave the emotions in check. I would say it's okay to have about 20% emotion into it. You're still human after all. You don't have to be the robot. Just don't be 80% emotion and 20% logic.
Yeah, by in check, I meant not out of control. All right, at the manager level, recommendation there, seek first to understand, listen to your people, and then to be understood. Invite recommendations, suggestions for improvement. The recommendation at the executive level is
1,000%. Yeah, yes, Oracore. Well, yes, all of it. Well, back to the managers real quick. If the process and stuff is above you, then take what we're saying from the employee perspective to work further up the chain, right? But if you're a manager with a level of power, I think it's
also the opportunity to, like, if the manager has the authority to change the process, that they could actually kind of take that on and not just pass it up the ladder, but actually try to work cross-functionally to change that process.
The vision. If you don't understand the vision of the process, then you should go seek to understand the vision and the what of the process, the output, so that then you can take it to your people.
Right.
And if you are the one that created the process, it's important that you get clear on what is the vision for this process and what are the expected results. And then so when that stuff comes up to you and people are bringing it, what you'll often find is there's that disconnect. So before you start solving hows, start working in the journey, make sure you have the vision and the expected outcome defined and use that as the litmus to bounce those changes off of. Because sometimes it's a lack of clarity of why, and other times it was the how was created in the absence of why. And I think that goes for both manager and executive.
Right. I'll give one practical application. We'll close here. One of the more frustrating jobs I've ever had was part of a kind of a channel marketing group that really struggled with their identity. Like, why do we exist? And when we would ask that question, we would go up the ladder. The answer that came back down was, well, because it's in the contract. Like, we have to spend this money on these channel partners. And so that was the why, was we have to spend X amount of dollars every year with these partners. And I would lay that one at the feet of the executives and say, that is true, but that's not good enough. Like, I need a better why than it's in the contract, right? And so part of the executive's job is to define success, right? Like, okay, so we spent the money. Do you just want to light it on fire? Like, what is it? How would we know if we've been successful? And I think that was maybe a practical application or an illustration of how the why was not defined clearly enough. And so the hows and the whats just got all over the place because the senior leadership team hadn't done the hard work to really define, why is this in the contract and what would success look like?
And I think if you go for the final bit on the executive, is the first step is ownership. Own the fact that you are responsible for everything down line of you. And if you don't take ownership and accountability first and foremost, then it's never going to solve the problem down line.
Yep. Even if that problem is burnout.
Make work not suck. Our podcast that talks about exactly that. Our process, vision, journey, culture, and results. We present real-world business solutions that make the difference. Our goal is to make work not suck. Hosted by Ryan Hodges, co-host Daniel Steere. Join us each episode and make work not suck.